When a young girl named Naomi arrives at a dimly lit orphanage on the outskirts of a small town, something about the fearful expressions of the other children and the unsettling silence that greets her sends a chill down her spine. She can't quite pinpoint the source of her unease, but every shaky step into that hallway feels heavier than the last, as though the very walls are trying to warn her of some dark secret lurking within. Before we dive into this story, let us know where you're watching from, and if you believe in the power of courage, hit that like button and subscribe for more. Naomi's journey to the orphanage begins on a grim, rainy afternoon. She spent most of her childhood in and out of temporary care, bouncing between relatives who couldn't keep her and group homes that never felt like home. She is small for her 11 years, with wiry limbs and wide brown eyes that reflect a resilient soul. Her mother passed away when Naomi was just a toddler. Her father, fraught with grief and unable to cope, vanished soon after, leaving her to be raised by whichever adult the state deemed responsible enough to handle her. In each prior foster situation, she never felt a sense of true belonging, but nothing prepared her for what this new environment would bring. A tall, stern-faced woman named Beth meets Naomi at the door. She introduces herself as one of the 2 foster parents who run the orphanage. She's wearing a faded floral apron and has strands of dark hair pulled into a severe bun. At her side stands her husband, Lawrence, a broad-shouldered man with a beard that shadows most of his face. He offers Naomi what seems like a polite greeting, but there's something off about his eyes, like there's a door behind them that he's keeping firmly locked. Beth's greeting is cold, perfunctory. "You must be Naomi. We've been expecting you." Her tone carries a false sweetness, like overripe fruit about to turn sour. She ushers the social worker inside, an overworked man named Carl, who looks more exhausted than usual. He glances around the cramped living room, sees the children quietly tidying up in the corners, and tries to offer Naomi a reassuring smile. Naomi forces one back, but her heart pounds. She can almost feel the tension in the air as the children glance at her with hollow eyes. The hallways leading away from the living room are dark, and from some distance, Naomi hears a faint clattering sound, like dishes being washed at a frantic pace. Carl signs a few forms, exchanging polite but strained words with Beth and Lawrence. "I trust she'll be in good hands," he says, his eyes darting around uneasily. He doesn't notice the nervous flinches of 2 younger children standing by the kitchen doorway. Lawrence's voice is steady, almost too calm. "Don't worry. We know how to handle children." Naomi notices that he emphasizes the word handle with a certain edge, but she can't explain why it unsettles her so much. Carl turns to Naomi and pats her shoulder. "I'll check back in a few weeks, okay? Hang in there." He forces another smile, then leaves hurriedly, perhaps relieved to be done with yet another transfer. As the front door closes behind him, Naomi is left standing in the living room, feeling smaller than ever under Beth's appraising stare. The sharpness of that gaze sets Naomi's nerves on edge. She senses something about this place is very, very wrong. The other children hover like silent shadows along the walls. There's a boy who looks about Naomi's age, a girl who appears slightly older, and 2 or 3 younger kids who keep their eyes down, almost as if they're afraid to make eye contact with Naomi or the foster parents. Beth breaks the silence by saying, "You'll be sleeping upstairs with the others. Tomorrow I'll show you your chores." She gestures for Naomi to follow as she ascends the narrow staircase. Naomi's new room is cramped. 5 beds squeezed into a space meant for 2 at most. The smell of stale sheets and faint mildew permeates the air. Beth offers no words of comfort. She simply points to the only unoccupied bed, tells Naomi to settle in, and warns her that lights go out at 9 sharp. Then she leaves, shutting the door behind her with a harsh click. The girl, who looks a bit older than Naomi, perhaps around 13, waits until Beth's footsteps fade, then crosses the room warily. She has tangled brown hair and a delicate face etched with worry. She says in a soft voice, "I'm Tasha. You new here?" Naomi nods shyly. "Just got here." Tasha introduces the others. There's Benjamin, or Ben, a pale boy with a bruise on his arm he tries to hide behind his sleeve. The younger ones are Grace and Oliver, both around 8, though Naomi can't tell if they're twins because they don't look alike, just similarly haunted. The final occupant of the room is a tall, lanky boy named Martin, who looks about 15. He doesn't say anything to Naomi. He just gives her a glance that seems to say, "Be careful." Then he turns away, staring at the worn wallpaper. Naomi's anxiety multiplies as she considers the bedraggled state of her new companions. She's been to places that were understaffed and underfunded, but even those group homes had a semblance of warmth. This place feels wholly different, like a place where hope goes to die. Exhausted from the day's events, Naomi places her small duffel bag beside the bed and lies down, unsure of what else to do. Her mind races with questions. Why are the children so scared? Why does this orphanage seem so neglected? She silently vows to keep her eyes open for answers. That first night is restless. Naomi hears hushed whispers, the sound of a child quietly sobbing, then a sharp reprimand from downstairs, Beth's voice cutting through the silence, telling someone to stop that whining. Eventually, Naomi falls into an uneasy sleep, her dreams plagued by fleeting images of locked doors and distant cries for help. She awakens before dawn to the clanging of a bell. Tasha, who's already out of bed, quickly explains, "That means we have to get up. Breakfast is at 6. If you're late, you get punished." The seriousness in Tasha's voice makes Naomi's stomach clench. They all scramble downstairs to the kitchen, where Beth stands by a large pot that smells of something warm and bland. Oatmeal, perhaps, though it looks watery and undercooked. Lawrence lurks by the table, arms crossed, watching each child like a hawk. Naomi lines up with the others to receive a small ladle's worth of the meal, accompanied by a single slice of bread. There's no chatter, no laughter, not even the usual grumbles children make when forced to eat something they don't like. The hush is all-consuming, broken only by the scrape of metal spoons against bowls. Beth announces, "When you're finished, you'll go outside. Today, you'll be helping with the laundry. Remember, no one leaves the grounds without permission." Her voice sharpens on the final sentence. Naomi notices that some of the children visibly tremble. Glancing around, she sees the backyard through a window, an expanse of unkempt grass where sheets and clothes are hung on multiple lines, fluttering in the early morning breeze. After breakfast, Naomi follows the group outside, half expecting to see some staff members who might oversee chores or at least keep an eye on the kids. But there are no other adults around, just Beth and Lawrence, who tower over everyone with menacing authority. Naomi helps Tasha and Ben carry loads of damp clothes to the lines. The work is heavy and repetitive. The baskets are filled to the brim. As Naomi struggles to lug one across the uneven ground, she notices bruises on Tasha's wrist. She also notices how Tasha carefully positions herself to hide them whenever Beth looks their way. By mid-morning, Naomi is sweaty, exhausted, and starting to grasp how grueling the routine is. There's no time for proper breaks. Any child who slows down is given a sharp rebuke and threatened with losing their meager lunch or dinner. Naomi wonders how an orphanage can be allowed to function with such negligence. She's certain the social services workers haven't seen this side of the place, or maybe they just haven't been paying attention. Under the bright sun, Naomi can see the anxious pallor on everyone's faces more clearly. She senses that none of them dare to speak up about the conditions. At lunchtime, they return indoors, and Beth repeats the same ladling process with a thin soup. The children eat quickly, eyes down. Lawrence stands at the head of the table, occasionally shooting glances around, as if daring anyone to complain. Naomi carefully observes him. He's tall, commanding, with heavy boots that clomp ominously on the floorboards. The tension in the room is tangible. Naomi senses that the older children, like Martin, must have tried to rebel at some point but learned the hard way there's a heavy price to pay. When lunch is over, Beth leads Naomi to a small closet in the hallway, instructing her to scrub the shelves and organize them by alphabetical order for cleaning supplies. "I don't want to see you slacking off," she warns. "And don't you even think about running away. We keep a close watch." Her gaze is ice cold. Naomi nods, feigning compliance. Inside her, a fire ignites. She hates bullies, and Beth and Lawrence are bullies of the worst kind. They pick on kids who have no one else to protect them. Despite her fear, Naomi feels the stirrings of a determination to do something about it, though she has no plan and no clue how to begin. As Naomi scrubs the shelves, she overhears muffled cries from the backyard. She peeks through a crack in the closet door to see Lawrence grabbing Martin by the arm, snarling something about working faster. Martin's face contorts with pain, but he keeps his mouth shut. Naomi's heart pounds in her chest. She fights the urge to run out and intervene. She knows it would only make things worse without a strategy. The notion that these foster parents can openly treat the children this way makes her stomach twist with anger and fear. The rest of the day is a monotonous cycle of chores, more laundry, cleaning windows, and then back indoors to tidy up the dusty rooms. Dinner is the same watery soup and stale bread. After supper, Beth makes an announcement. "Tasha and Ben, you'll be cleaning the barn tomorrow. Naomi, you'll assist them. The rest of you have your usual tasks. We don't tolerate sloppiness, remember that?" The mention of a barn is surprising. Naomi hadn't realized the property included one. She wonders just how large the estate is. That evening, Naomi trudges upstairs with the other children, her arms aching from labor. In the bedroom, Tasha sits on her bed, tears glinting in her eyes. "I'm sorry you ended up here," she whispers when Naomi sits next to her. "I was hoping you'd get placed somewhere good, like some kids do. This place is a nightmare." Naomi hesitates, then asks, "Why hasn't anyone reported them?" Tasha shakes her head sadly. "We can't. They never let us out of their sight. And every time a social worker comes, Lawrence and Beth put on an act. Clean clothes for us, good food, and we're told what to say." She shows Naomi a faded scar on her forearm. "This is what happened when I tried to run. I got caught." Naomi feels a lump in her throat. "Doesn't anyone ever get adopted?" Tasha shrugs. "Sometimes. But only if the parents who come to visit want to meet a certain kind of kid. Most of us are too old or too quiet, or we're told to keep our mouths shut and not let on what's really going on. If we say anything, we're punished. Some kids just break. They stop talking, stop hoping." A heaviness settles over Naomi. She can almost taste the despair clinging to every corner of this rundown orphanage. That night she can't sleep. She keeps replaying scenes in her mind, Martin wincing in pain, Tasha's scar, Ben's bruised arm. She thinks about her own future here. She refuses to let herself be crushed by these tyrants. There must be a way out, a way to expose the truth. Days turn into a dreary routine, and Naomi experiences firsthand the labor demands that Beth and Lawrence impose. Morning chores begin at the crack of dawn, hauling buckets of water to scrub floors, washing mountains of laundry, and occasionally cleaning out the old barn filled with dusty debris. The children move like automatons, their spirits worn down by relentless exhaustion. Naomi notices that they barely have time to do any of the usual kid activities. No playing, no schooling, just endless housework and farmland maintenance. A few weeks pass, and Naomi realizes she hasn't even seen a single official or visitor come by. It's as though the orphanage operates in complete isolation from the outside world. She wonders if Carl, the social worker, has forgotten her entirely. The pang of loneliness mingles with a fierce determination to survive. One evening after lights out, Naomi quietly gathers Tasha, Ben, and Martin near her bed. She speaks in hushed tones, "We can't live like this. There has to be a way to get help." Martin gives her a skeptical look. "You think we haven't tried? The place is locked up like a prison at night. There's barbed wire near the back fence, and all the windows are either barred or have alarms." Naomi's jaw tightens. "There has to be a weak spot. Somewhere we can slip through." Tasha looks at Naomi with something close to hope. If we could get to the police, we'd have to show them proof. Otherwise, they won't believe us. Beth and Lawrence are good at covering their tracks. Ben chimes in softly, we can't bring cameras or anything. They keep everything locked up. Naomi swallows. Still, we have to try. I'll do it alone if I have to, so none of you get punished. Martin's eyes flick to the door, as if worried someone might be listening. Don't be a fool, he mutters. Running off alone will just get you caught. Then you'll end up like the others who tried. He gestures to his own bruised knuckles. Better to keep your head down, do what you're told. Naomi can tell he's speaking from a place of fear. She doesn't blame him. Still, she refuses to accept that this is all there is. Over the next few days, Naomi makes subtle observations. She notes that Lawrence checks the doors at night, but occasionally, around midnight, he goes to his bedroom, leaving the back entrance unwatched for a few minutes, perhaps while he's preparing for bed. She also notices that Beth sets up a routine walk around the property around 10 o'clock, then again at around 3 in the morning. That leaves a narrow window of time in between when their guard might be down. One night, Naomi decides to make her move. She waits until everyone in the dormitory is asleep, or at least pretending to be. Slipping out of bed, she quietly creeps toward the window at the end of the hallway, the one that overlooks the backyard. Her heart thunders in her chest. She doesn't have a flashlight. She doesn't want to risk being seen. Moonlight filters in through the dirty glass, casting a pale glow over the corridor. Naomi lifts the window slowly, praying it won't squeak. It does, just a little, but not loud enough to raise an alarm. She's halfway out when she hears a creak on the stairs. She freezes, breath caught in her throat. For a moment, she thinks it might be Beth or Lawrence. But then she hears a whispered voice. Naomi? It's Tasha, standing at the top of the staircase, trembling. She looks torn between warning Naomi and letting her go. Don't do it, Tasha hisses. They'll catch you. They always catch us. Naomi steels herself, not wanting to draw any more attention. I have to try, she whispers back, then hoists herself onto the ledge. The drop to the ground isn't too high, maybe 6 or 7 feet, but it's high enough to injure her if she lands wrong. With a careful push, Naomi manages to drop onto the grass below, knees bending to absorb the impact. She stands still for a second, listening for any shouts or movements from the house. Nothing. The night air is cold, and a soft wind rustles the trees that line the backyard. She moves quietly, each step measured. She passes the laundry lines, the barn, and heads for the tall fence at the back of the property. That's when she spots the barbed wire glinting in the moonlight. She swallows hard, thinking about how she might get over it. She moves along the fence until she finds a spot where a large tree grows close to the boundary. Its branches hang over part of the fence, and though there's still wire, it might be possible to climb high enough to jump past it. Naomi takes a deep breath, then grips the tree trunk. She's always been a decent climber, but fear and the possibility of tearing her clothing on the wire make her arms tremble. Slowly, she ascends, careful to place each foot securely on a knot in the bark. She hears an owl hoot in the distance, and the sound nearly startles her off the branch. She clamps her mouth shut to stifle a yelp. Eventually, she reaches a branch that extends over the fence. She scoots along it, pressing herself flat to keep from slipping. The barbed wire is just inches below her. She tries to gauge if she can leap beyond it without slicing her legs. Summoning her courage, she braces herself, then jumps. For one heart-stopping moment, she feels something catch at her pants, and a ripping sound breaks the night silence. She lands hard on the ground outside the fence, panting. A small tear in the fabric of her jeans and a shallow scratch on her calf is all she suffers. She exhales in relief and glances up. No lights, no sign that anyone hurt her. She made it out. Her chest tight with adrenaline, Naomi navigates through the dense woods that surround the orphanage. She doesn't know the area well, but she's overheard Beth and Lawrence mention the main road is about a half-mile to the west. With the moon as her guide, She stumbles over roots and pushes aside branches, nearly tripping several times. After what feels like an eternity, she spots the faint glow of a street lamp through the trees. She emerges onto a lonely stretch of pavement, her heart still drumming fiercely. She's free, for now. But she knows the real challenge is just beginning, getting someone to believe her story. The walk to the small local police station, which is at least another mile down the road, feels like hours. Naomi is exhausted, hungry, and every rustle of leaves or distant barking of a dog makes her imagine Beth or Lawrence closing in on her. She forces her weary legs to keep going until she finally sees the squat brick building with the word "Police" illuminated by a flickering neon sign. She almost cries with relief. It's late, well past midnight, but there should at least be one officer on duty. Naomi rushes to the front door, practically collapsing as she pushes it open. The reception area is lit by harsh fluorescent lights that flicker ominously. A lone officer sits behind a counter, half asleep. He snaps to attention when he sees this disheveled girl stumbling in. Naomi breathes hard, tears threatening to spill, as she blurts out her story. "Please, you have to help. My name's Naomi. The orphanage, the foster parents, they're making us work, they're hurting us." She struggles to get the words out coherently, her adrenaline spent. The officer, whose name tag reads Officer Sanders, looks bewildered. He stands up, guides Naomi to a chair, and gives her a glass of water. "Slow down, kid. Tell me what's going on." Naomi repeats her story, more slowly this time. The abuses, the forced labor, the strict punishments, the bruise marks on the other children. Officer Sanders listens, brow furrowed, but there's a hint of skepticism in his eyes. "That's a pretty serious claim," he says. "Are you sure you're not exaggerating? Sometimes kids run away from orphanages because they don't like chores." Naomi's heart sinks. She can see the doubt. She begs him to send someone to investigate, or at least let her show him the bruises and scars on the other kids. But without any tangible evidence, no photos, no video, no adult corroboration, her plea sounds like a child complaining about harsh chores. Officer Sanders sighs. "Let me at least call them to see if they've reported you missing." The dread in Naomi's stomach intensifies. She knows exactly how Beth and Lawrence will spin this. A few minutes later, after a short phone call, Officer Sanders returns. "They said you've run away before and that you have a history of lying. They seemed worried about you, and they're on their way to pick you up." Naomi's eyes widen, panic making her want to flee the station. She pleads with Officer Sanders, "Please don't send me back there. You have to believe me." But he's already made up his mind. He nods sympathetically, but his actions betray him. "I'm sorry, kid. Without proof, there's not much we can do. And they're your legal guardians right now." Naomi can do nothing but watch as Beth and Lawrence, all concerned smiles and honeyed words, arrive at the station. Beth rushes in first, kneeling in front of Naomi with a show of maternal worry. "Oh, sweetheart, we've been worried sick. Why did you run away?" She glances at Officer Sanders with tearful eyes that Naomi can see are nothing but a performance. Lawrence stands behind Beth, arms folded, a subtle smirk curling his lips whenever Sanders isn't looking. Naomi shudders at how easily they can deceive others. They take her back, and in the car ride, neither of them speaks at first. The silence is suffocating. When they finally reach the orphanage grounds and the car doors slam shut, Lawrence grips Naomi's arm with crushing force, yanking her toward the house. "You think you can just run off and ruin us?" he hisses. His voice is low and filled with venom. Beth's face contorts with rage. "We feed you, we give you a roof, and this is how you repay us?" Her voice is shaking, no longer bothering to hide her fury. They drag Naomi inside, ignoring the curious or fearful glances of the other children awakened by the commotion. Beth snaps at them to go back to bed. She and Lawrence haul Naomi into a small, windowless storeroom at the far end of the hallway, a place Naomi's never seen before. It smells stale like moldy cardboard. There's just enough room for Naomi to sit or lie down, but not much else. You want to run away? You can sit here and think about your actions, Beth seethes. I'll make sure you don't leave again. The door slams shut, the lock clicks, and darkness envelopes Naomi. She sits there, tears finally spilling down her cheeks. Fear twists her insides. She desperately wonders if anyone will ever believe her. The oppressive darkness of the tiny room feels like the final nail in her coffin. For who knows how long, she remains there in silence, her mind replaying the humiliating scene at the police station, the pitying look on Officer Sanders' face, and the triumphant smirk on Lawrence's lips. Her hopes seem to crumble into dust. In the following days, Naomi is isolated from the other children. She's let out only under the strict supervision of Beth or Lawrence, forced to do chores in silence. She sleeps in that storeroom on a thin blanket that barely covers the cold floor. She's given sparse meals, bread and water mostly. She rarely even sees Tasha, Ben, or Martin, and when she does catch a glimpse, their eyes are filled with sorrow and helplessness. The isolation drains her, and she starts to lose faith that anyone, anywhere, cares enough to help. Little does she know, someone did care. During that desperate plea at the police station, another officer named Mike was finishing up his shift in the back office. He only caught fragments of Naomi's story, but it was enough to plant a seed of doubt in his mind. After Naomi was taken away by Beth and Lawrence, Mike questioned Officer Sanders about the situation. Sanders shrugged it off as another runaway. But Mike couldn't shake the uneasy feeling that something was off. He'd heard rumors before, whispers of shady orphanages in neighboring counties. And something in Naomi's voice, that edge of genuine terror, stayed with him. A couple of days later, Mike decides to check the orphanage out on his own. It's his day off, and he doesn't tell anyone at the station because he doesn't want to stir up suspicion if it turns out to be nothing. He drives his personal car down the same lonely road Naomi had walked, pulling up to the fenced property. He's not in uniform, wanting to appear inconspicuous, just a man in a jacket and jeans. He knocks on the door. Beth answers, wearing her standard floral apron, an artificial smile plastered on her face. "Can I help you?" she asks sweetly. Mike explains that he's looking for volunteer opportunities, claiming he heard this orphanage might need extra hands for chores or tutoring. Beth's smile wavers just a bit, but she invites him in, mentioning that her husband is out running errands. The inside of the house looks relatively tidy, no children are in sight. Mike clocks the uneasy quiet immediately. Orphanages are usually bustling with noise. Beth leads him to the living room, offering a seat. "The kids are currently busy with their studies," she says, flashing that tight-lipped smile. Mike notices that the kitchen door is shut. He wonders if the children are really behind it or if they're just being hidden. He tries to make small talk, gleaning bits of information. Beth claims they have about a dozen children and that the place is run on donations. She sounds well-rehearsed. Mike observes her body language. Her shoulders are tense, her eyes flicker nervously when he asks about the daily routine. She mentions strict discipline, but brushes it off as necessary for children who have been through so much trauma. Mike's instincts are screaming that something isn't right. He politely asks if he can see the kids, maybe say hello. Beth's smile becomes strained. "Oh, I'm sorry, they're doing some very concentrated work right now. Maybe later." Mike doesn't push it, he knows he needs to stay under the radar. Instead, he says he'll drop off some supplies next week and thanks her for her time. Just as he's about to leave, he notices a piece of paper on the floor in the hallway. He bends down to pick it up. It's a small scrap with scribbled writing that looks like it might be a child's handwriting. Before Beth can see, he slips it into his pocket. Once outside, Mike gets in his car, drives down the road a bit, and parks in a secluded spot. He takes out the paper. It says in shaky letters, "Naomi locked in storeroom. Please help." His heart lurches. Oh, that must be the same girl who came to the station. So the story was true. He knows he can't ignore this. But he also knows he needs proof. solid evidence that will stand up to scrutiny. He decides to investigate carefully, gather what he can before calling in a formal raid. He's aware that if he storms in with accusations, Beth and Lawrence could move the kids or cover their tracks. That evening, Mike sets up a plan. He calls in a favor from a friend who knows a bit about private investigations. Together, they figure out a way to plant a small camera near the property, hoping to capture any visible abuse or suspicious activity. For the next few days, Mike discreetly monitors the area. He sees the children being marched outside in the early morning, assigned to labor in the yard and barn. He uses a pair of binoculars to get a closer look. The kids look exhausted, and from a distance, he can make out bruises on more than one child's arms. It's enough to confirm something terrible is happening, but not enough to definitively bring charges. He needs to get inside again, perhaps at a time when Lawrence is there, too. He also wants to find Naomi, to confirm she's really locked up. One night, Mike sneaks onto the property, careful to avoid the perimeter cameras he's spotted near the fence. He manages to peer through a window on the side of the house. Inside, he sees Naomi in a dimly lit room, her face pale, her posture slumped. His gut clenches at the sight. She's alone, and the door behind her looks solid, maybe reinforced. Determined, Mike tries to think of a way to speak to her. He taps very lightly on the window pane. Naomi looks up, startled. Her eyes widen with hope when she recognizes him from the station. She scrambles to the window, and although it's locked, she can whisper through the glass. "Please help me," she manages to say, voice cracking. Mike nods, pressing his hand against the glass. "I will," he whispers. "But we need evidence. Something concrete." Naomi glances over her shoulder, terrified. "Beth and Lawrence keep everything locked," she says. "I don't know what I can show you. They took my bag, my clothes, everything." Mike's mind races. He thinks about the hidden camera he brought with him, a small device that can record audio and video. "Can you hold on to something small?" he asks. She hesitates, then nods. "I'll leave a device behind the bushes outside this window tomorrow night. Try to slip out and get it when they're not looking. Hide it somewhere. Record them if you can. If they say something incriminating." Naomi's eyes flicker with renewed determination. She agrees, though the fear in her gaze is evident. Then they hear footsteps approaching. Mike ducks out of sight, flattening himself against the side of the house. The footsteps stop just inside the room. It's Beth. Her voice is cold. "Who are you talking to?" Naomi tries to act sleepy, rubbing her eyes. "No one. I was just, I thought I heard something outside." Beth's tone remains suspicious. "Don't lie to me." She glares at Naomi, then stares at the locked window. After a tense moment, Beth huffs. "Get some sleep. Tomorrow's another long day." She leaves, locking the door behind her. Mike waits, heart pounding, until the hallway lights go off again. Then he slips away into the night. The next day, Beth decides to let Naomi out of the storeroom to continue her chores under supervision, but warns her, "Don't even think about trying to escape." Naomi is on edge, but the flicker of hope Mike ignited keeps her going. She scrubs floors, washes dishes, and does everything she can to avoid suspicion. Later that evening, when Beth is distracted in the kitchen and Lawrence is dealing with a broken fence post out back, Naomi seizes her moment. She remembers the plan. Mike would leave a device behind the bushes. Under the pretense of hanging laundry, she slips outside. She carefully creeps to the side of the house, heart hammering. Behind a thick bush, she finds a tiny black camera with a small microphone attached, a device small enough to tuck under her shirt. She glances around. The yard is empty for the moment. She quickly conceals the camera, returning indoors before anyone notices. For the next 2 days, Naomi tries to record conversations or evidence that might prove the abuse. She carries the device in a pocket and silently prays it's capturing the screaming matches, the threats, the slaps or yells. She manages to record Beth shouting at Tasha in the barn, "If you don't work harder, you'll get the belt again." Tasha's frightened reply is faint but clear. "I'm trying, I swear." Naomi also records the sound of Lawrence berating Martin, telling him he's worthless, ordering him to scrub floors until his hands bleed. The hardest part for Naomi is to remain calm and not blow her cover, especially when she witnesses her friends enduring pain. She comforts herself knowing that every vile word coming from the foster parents' mouths is being preserved. Finally, Naomi arranges a way to get the device back to Mike. One night, she sneaks it behind the bush again, leaving a small note with it. "I hope this is enough." She crosses her fingers that Mike will come back for it. Sure enough, the next morning, the device is gone. Naomi waits anxiously for a sign that Mike has heard the evidence and is taking action. However, 3 more days pass with no indication that anything is happening. Naomi feels her hopes slip, wondering if maybe the recordings weren't clear enough or if Mike had run into obstacles. On the 4th day, Beth and Lawrence are in a foul mood. Some of the livestock in the barn fell ill, and the repairs to the fence are costing more money than expected. They take their frustrations out on the children, dishing out even harsher punishments for minor slip-ups. Beth grabs Tasha by the wrist so hard that the younger girl yelps in pain, and Lawrence forces Martin to kneel in the yard for an hour after he accidentally dropped a crate of supplies. Naomi trembles with anger, feeling powerless but trying to keep her head down. Near sundown, as the children are finishing dinner, a sudden knock rattles the front door. Lawrence sets down his spoon, exchanging a wary look with Beth. "Were we expecting anyone?" he mutters. Beth shakes her head. Lawrence strides to the door and opens it. Standing on the porch is Mike, dressed in his full uniform this time, accompanied by another officer and a car parked behind them with headlights illuminating the yard. Naomi can see them from where she's sitting in the kitchen. Her heart leaps. "Evening," Mike says firmly. "We're here to follow up on a report about potential abuse." Beth tries to protest. "Abuse? That's outrageous. We run a strict home, sure, but these kids are troubled." "Who filed this complaint?" Mike maintains a calm but authoritative stance. "We have evidence." "May we come in?" Lawrence tries to block the door. "You got a warrant?" he growls. Mike lifts a folded document from his belt. "Yes, we do." As they step inside, the entire kitchen falls silent. The children look up, hope and fear mingling in their eyes. Beth's voice trembles with attempted indignation. "Officer, this is ridiculous. We have nothing to hide." Mike doesn't respond to her directly. Instead, he turns to the group of kids, scanning their faces until he locks eyes with Naomi. She can't stop the tears that spring up. He notices the bruises on several of them, the haunted stares, the malnourished appearance. Another officer, Jenkins, walks around, taking notes, snapping photos on a small digital camera. "We'll need to see all the rooms," Jenkins says. "Everywhere the children sleep, all storage areas, the barn." Beth and Lawrence exchange a panicked look. Lawrence tries to stall. "It's late, and we have minors here. Maybe we can schedule a proper meeting tomorrow?" Mike isn't having it. "We'll handle it now," he says, his tone unwavering. The children remain silent, not daring to hope too much. But Naomi senses the shift in power. For once, Beth and Lawrence aren't in control. Mike leads Jenkins and a couple more arriving officers through the orphanage. In the storeroom, they find a makeshift bed on the floor. A musty smell hits them the moment they open the door. "Who's kept here?" Jenkins asks, his face turning grim. Beth tries to lie. "Oh, it's just for storage. A child might have slept there voluntarily." The officers exchange skeptical glances. Then they find the worn chain and lock that had been used to secure the door from the outside. It's enough to confirm that this was some form of solitary confinement. In the barn, Jenkins snaps pictures of filthy conditions, the torn gloves, the battered tools the children are forced to use. A hidden nook reveals a stack of belts and sticks, some stained with who knows what. Mike clenches his jaw at the sight, struggling to keep his composure. Meanwhile, Lawrence trails behind them, offering half-baked excuses about discipline and structure, but the evidence is damning. Amidst this tense search, Naomi slips away to the hallway, where she sees the other kids huddled together. She moves to Tasha, taking her hand. Tasha is shaking like a leaf in a storm. Is it really happening? Tasha asks, tears brimming. Are they finally going to get caught? Naomi wants to believe it. She squeezes Tasha's hand reassuringly, though her own heart pounds with dread. She knows how manipulative Beth and Lawrence can be. Even with the evidence, a court hearing might be needed before the children are truly free. Finally, Mike confronts Lawrence in the barn. We have recordings of you threatening these children, Mike says evenly. We have proof of neglect, forced labor, and physical abuse. Lawrence's bravado wanes. He glances at the door as if thinking about making a run for it. Then he growls, "You come onto my property with your cameras and your fancy warrants, acting like you know everything. These brats are liars." He lunges at Mike, aiming to push past him. Mike stands his ground. The two collide, wrestling for a moment. Lawrence is physically larger, but he's frantic. Mike is trained, methodical. He manages to pin Lawrence's arm behind his back. Lawrence yells in pain and fury, but can't break free. Jenkins rushes over, helping Mike handcuff him. Meanwhile, Beth tries to flee out the front door, but she's intercepted by another officer. She screams about how they're framing her, how she's an angel who devoted her life to these ungrateful children. Her protests fall on deaf ears. The children watch, stunned, as their tormentors are led away in handcuffs. Naomi's breath catches in her throat, emotions crashing over her like a tidal wave, relief, disbelief, fear that it might not last. She steps forward, her voice trembling as she asks, "What happens now?" Mike kneels to meet her eyes. "You're safe," he says gently, "but we'll need you to tell your story." The police station is a blur of paperwork, statements, and medical checks. Doctors arrive to examine the children's injuries and malnourished states. A sense of cautious hope envelopes them. Tasha, Ben, Martin, and the younger kids cling to one another, still unsure if this is truly freedom or just another temporary fix. Naomi and the others share their accounts with officers who record every detail. Mike stays close, offering what reassurance he can. He manages to pull Naomi aside at one point, crouching down to her level. "You did good," he says. "Without your courage, none of this would have come to light." She tears up, nodding. In the days that follow, a wave of media attention descends upon the orphanage scandal. Headlines read, "Couple arrested for child abuse and forced labor at local orphanage." Public outcry mounts, and an emergency hearing is scheduled. The children are temporarily placed in a safer group facility under the supervision of protective services. Naomi almost can't believe it when she finally gets to sleep in a real bed with clean sheets again, in a room that isn't locked from the outside. Yet she's haunted by nightmares of Beth and Lawrence returning to take her away. The day of the court hearing arrives. It's held in a modest courthouse, a plain, cream-colored building with well-worn floors that squeak underfoot. Naomi and several other children, accompanied by their assigned caseworkers, file into a solemn courtroom. Beth and Lawrence appear, dressed in ill-fitting suits, looking pale and furious. Their defense attorney sits stiffly beside them. Mike testifies about the evidence he gathered. Officer Jenkins corroborates with photographs and witness statements. The prosecuting attorney lays out every vile detail of the forced labor, the withheld food, the physical punishments. Then comes the children's turn to speak. Tasha trembles as she describes the beatings and the scars on her arm. Ben, who can barely stop shaking, admits he was forced to weed the field for hours under the scorching sun, denied water unless he completed a set amount of chores. Martin recounts how he once tried to protect a younger child from Lawrence's anger and got locked in the storeroom for 2 days. Finally, Naomi is called. She sits on the witness stand, knees quivering, her voice a little shaky at first. But she finds her resolve and clearly narrates everything she witnessed and endured: the isolation, the attempt to escape, the despair of being returned by the police, and the final relief when Mike came back to help. Throughout the testimonies, Beth and Lawrence maintain their innocence, insisting that the children are lying or exaggerating, that they only used reasonable discipline. But the audio recordings from Naomi's hidden camera play for the court, revealing their threats, curses, and explicit admissions of forced labor. Gasps and murmurs fill the courtroom. The judge's expression grows increasingly stern. After 2 days of proceedings, the verdict is delivered. Beth and Lawrence are found guilty on multiple counts: child abuse, neglect, endangering the welfare of minors, and more. Naomi watches as the bailiffs escort them away. A wave of relief washes over her, but she also feels a pang of lingering fear that the system might fail again, or that somewhere else in the world, more children are trapped with people like Beth and Lawrence. Nevertheless, this is a victory, and it's hers, too. In the days following the trial, the children from the orphanage are placed in safer homes, though adoption processes can be slow and complicated. Mike, however, steps forward for Naomi. He's grown attached to the brave little girl who risked everything to uncover the truth. Initially, he isn't sure if the legal system will let a single police officer adopt her, but he's determined. He fills out the necessary paperwork, undergoes the background checks and interviews, and proves that he can offer Naomi a stable, loving environment. One bright afternoon, in a quieter courtroom, a judge finalizes the adoption. Naomi stands by Mike's side, clutching his hand. When the judge declares them officially father and daughter, Naomi bursts into tears, and Mike bends down to hug her. She sobs against his shoulder, relief and happiness overwhelming her. This time, they're tears of joy. Mike's home is modest but warm, a small suburban house with a tidy lawn and a friendly dog named Cooper, who greets Naomi with a wagging tail. Mike shows her the room he's prepared: soft yellow walls, a window overlooking a backyard with a swing set, and a shelf full of books. "I've been saving this for you," he says softly, his voice brimming with affection. Naomi can't find the words to express her gratitude. Instead, she hugs him again, clinging tightly, grateful to finally have someone who won't betray her. Adjusting to a normal life isn't easy at first. Naomi sometimes wakes up in the middle of the night, expecting to be locked in a closet or forced out of bed for chores. Mike is patient, comforting her, reminding her that she's safe now. She starts attending a local school, where she meets other kids who have no idea what she's been through. Gradually, she learns to smile again, to trust again. She writes letters to Tasha, Ben, and Martin, who are each in the process of finding permanent homes or returning to extended family if possible. She hopes they'll find the happiness and safety they all deserve. Rumors swirl that the orphanage property will be sold or converted into a community center under new management, ensuring no other children will suffer there. Naomi feels a sense of closure the day she sees a for sale sign hammered into the ground outside the chain-link fence. She knows the horrors that happened there will never vanish from her memory, but at least they've been stopped from continuing. Over the following months, Naomi and Mike create a routine that feels like genuine family life: shared meals, evenings watching movies, weekend trips to the park with Cooper. Naomi shows an interest in helping others, perhaps because she knows firsthand the importance of compassion. She volunteers at a local animal shelter, and Mike encourages her. Sometimes, on quiet nights, Naomi confides in him about the nightmares and flashbacks. He listens intently, never judging, always reassuring her that what she went through doesn't define her. One afternoon, as Mike is cleaning out a closet, he finds Naomi's old duffel bag, the one she brought from the orphanage. Inside are a few worn clothes and a ragged stuffed rabbit with one ear partially torn. Naomi enters the room, sees the rabbit, and her face lights up with both happiness and sadness. "My mom gave me that when I was really little," she murmurs, taking the stuffed toy in her hands. "I lost everything else, but I still have this." She holds it close, tears glistening in her eyes. Mike gently wraps an arm around her shoulders. "Then we'll keep it safe," he says. Naomi closes her eyes, leaning into him. "Thank you. for everything. In time, Naomi's scars, both physical and emotional, begin to heal. She excels at school, discovering a knack for art and writing. She joins a creative writing club, sharing fictional tales of bravery and resilience, though the underlying themes reflect her own experiences. Mike, deeply proud of her, attends every school event and beams like any loving parent would. Naomi even starts to speak at small community gatherings about her story, urging people to pay closer attention to foster homes and orphanages, to ask questions, and to always listen to children's voices. Life isn't perfect. She still has episodes of anxiety and moments of overwhelming sadness. But she no longer faces those demons alone. Mike remains her steadfast ally, reminding her that the courage she showed in exposing Beth and Lawrence is something she'll carry forever. Their small house, once quiet, now resonates with the warmth of shared laughter and the occasional bark from Cooper chasing squirrels in the backyard. It's a sunny weekend morning when Naomi turns 12. Mike sets out a modest birthday celebration, just a few neighborhood friends, a homemade chocolate cake, and bright balloons that dance in the breeze. Naomi can hardly believe she's celebrating her birthday in a real home, with real friends, rather than being forced to scrub floors or hang laundry under the watchful eyes of cruel guardians. As she blows out the candles, she silently makes a wish, for the other children who are still waiting for safe homes, for the Tashas and Bens of the world who haven't found their Mike yet. When she opens her gifts, she finds a new art set, paints, brushes, canvases, from Mike. "I noticed you like to draw," he says, smiling. Naomi hugs him tightly, once again feeling that rush of gratitude. In that moment, the doorbell rings, and she rushes to see who it is. Tasha stands on the porch, holding a small wrapped box, a shy smile on her face. Behind her is a social worker who arranged the visit. Naomi squeals with delight, pulling Tasha into a hug. They spend the afternoon together, reminiscing but mostly just enjoying the freedom that was once a distant dream. By dusk, Tasha has to leave, but she whispers to Naomi, "I'm so happy you found a real dad." As the years roll on, Naomi never forgets the lessons she learned in that dark orphanage. She understands that sometimes, doing the right thing is terrifying, and you might stand alone in your convictions. But she also knows that persistence and a single helping hand can change everything. She's living proof that adversity can be overcome, though the scars will always remind her of where she's been. Her bond with Mike grows stronger. They may not share blood, but they share something far deeper, a faith in each other, forged in a moment of desperate need and unwavering support. On a quiet evening, Naomi sits at the kitchen table, working on her homework. Mike is doing the dishes, humming softly. She pauses, setting her pencil down. "Dad," she says, testing the word on her tongue. Mike turns, water dripping from his hands, a quizzical smile on his lips. "Yes?" She smiles back. "Just wanted to say I love you." He dries his hands, walks over, and gently touches her shoulder. "I love you too, kiddo. More than anything." In that simple exchange, all the ghosts of the orphanage recede just a bit further into the past. Naomi still remembers every detail. She always will, but she no longer feels helpless or alone. Justice was served in court, and her new life is a testament to the possibility of hope and redemption. She still stays in touch with Tasha, Ben, Martin, and the others, celebrating their milestones as they find their own paths to healing. One day, she hopes to share her story more widely, to stand as proof that no matter how daunting the darkness, there's always a chance for light. Thanks for watching till the end. If you enjoyed the story, give this video a like if you haven't already and subscribe for more.